Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive today. We're going deep into Buddha's brain,
Ooh, fascinating.
exploring how Buddhist wisdom and modern neuroscience kind of intersect.
Yeah,
I know you're interested in Buddhism and its effects on the brain,
very much so.
so we'll be pulling out some really fascinating insights from Rick Hanson's presentation on the topic.
Yeah.
Get ready to discover how everyday things, from caffeine to focused practice, can actually, reshape your brain.
I'm ready.
So it's really incredible how Hanson bridges the gap between these seemingly totally different worlds.
Yeah.
He highlights this concept called self-directed neuroplasticity, which basically means our mental activity can physically shape our brains.
That's incredible. Yeah. It suggests we have so much more control over our well-being than we think.
It really is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So what does self-directed neuroplasticity look like in practice?
Well, even simple things like a cup of coffee
Oh, yeah.
can change your brain chemistry and shift your mental state.
Yeah.
And studies even show that the thickness of certain brain regions, like the insula, can influence things like self-awareness and empathy.
Wow.
Now, if everyday things can do that, imagine the potential of dedicated meditation practice.
Seriously makes you wonder what consistent mindfulness could do.
Absolutely.
It's almost as if we can steer the direction of our mental and emotional well-being.
Hmm.
To understand how we can steer, Hanson uses the triune brain model to show how our brains evolved.
Okay.
Can you break down this model for us?
Absolutely. The triune brain model has three main parts: the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and the human brain, each adding layers of complexity as we evolved. The reptilian brain, the oldest part, focuses on survival, controlling things like breathing and fight or flight responses.
Right.
The mammalian brain brought in emotions, memory, and social behaviors.
Okay.
And finally, the human brain, with its massive cortex, allows for things like abstract thought, language planning, and empathy.
Okay, I'm following so far, but why is it important to understand this triune brain model? How can it help us in our daily lives?
Understanding these three brain levels can help you become more aware of your reactions.
Okay.
For example, when you feel that fight or flight impulse, you can recognize it as your reptilian brain kicking in.
Oh, interesting.
It gives you a framework to understand why you react in certain ways, and maybe allows for more conscious responses
Okay.
instead of just reacting on autopilot.
So we're not just slaves to our ancient brains.
Exactly. Hanson points out that the human brain is capable of a responsive mode, a state of calm contentment, care, and creativity.
That sounds really nice.
He suggests that this is our natural home base, a state we can cultivate through practice.
That sounds like a pretty incredible state to be in.
Yeah,
But I have a feeling it's not always easy to access that responsive mode.
you're right.
Are there obstacles on the path to this home base?
You're absolutely right. One of the biggest hurdles is what Hanson calls the negativity bias.
I've heard about this negativity bias.
Yeah.
It seems like something we should unpack.
Yeah.
What's the deal with our brains being wired for negativity?
It's fascinating, really. Our brains are wired to focus on threats and negative experiences more strongly than positive ones. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. For our ancestors, it was more critical to avoid danger and survive than to enjoy rewards.
So if you didn't notice that saber-toothed tiger, you wouldn't live to pass on your genes.
Right. Exactly.
Makes sense in that context.
Yeah.
But how does this negativity bias play out in our modern lives? We're not exactly dodging saber-toothed tigers on our daily commutes.
Even though we don't face those same threats, our brains still operate with that ancient wiring, constantly scanning for danger.
Oh, wow.
This can really affect how we see the world.
Oh, so?
Think about it. We tend to dwell on criticisms more than compliments.
Yeah.
Remember painful events more vividly than joyful ones.
It's true.
And even overestimate the likelihood of bad things happening.
It's almost ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our brains are so focused on avoiding danger that they forget to enjoy the good stuff.
Yeah.
I know I'm guilty of that. Do you ever find yourself dwelling on the negative?
Absolutely. And the real kicker is this negativity bias doesn't just impact our thoughts, it affects our physical health too.
Oh, no.
Studies show that chronic stress, often fueled by this negativity bias, can weaken the immune system, contribute to cardiovascular problems, and even lead to digestive issues.
Wow. It sounds like this ancient wiring is working against us in the modern world.
It can feel that way.
That's pretty bleak.
Hmm.
Is there any hope for overcoming this negativity bias?
Absolutely. We can't rewire our brains overnight, but Hanson emphasizes that mindfulness is a powerful tool for training our attention and shaping our brains for the better.
Okay.
It's not about eliminating negative thoughts altogether,
Right.
but rather changing our relationship with them.
So mindfulness can help us rewrite the script, so to speak.
Exactly.
But how does mindfulness actually work to change our brains?
It all comes down to awareness and attention.
Okay.
When we practice mindfulness, we're illuminating what we focus on and strengthening those neural pathways. It's like shining a spotlight on the positive aspects of our experience and consciously choosing to give them more weight.
So instead of automatically going down that rabbit hole of negativity,
Yeah.
mindfulness gives us the space to choose a different response.
Precisely. It's not just about shifting our focus. Mindfulness actually changes our brains in 7 key ways.
Wow.
For instance, it calms the nervous system, which you might experience as a sense of ease and relaxation during meditation.
That makes sense.
No.
Sounds like a much-needed skill in today's world.
Absolutely. And that leads us to one of Hanson's most compelling concepts, taking in the good, or TIG.
Okay, I have to hear more about this TIG thing. It sounds intriguing, and honestly, after all that talk about negativity bias, we could all use a little more good in our lives.
I agree. It's a simple but powerful concept. Think about it. Negative experiences tend to stick to us like Velcro, while positive experiences are more like Teflon. They slip right through our minds unless we make an effort to hold on to them. TIG is all about savoring those positive moments and actively weaving them into the fabric of our brains.
So instead of letting those good moments evaporate, we need to find ways to really soak them in. It
Exactly.
almost sounds too simple.
It might sound simple, but there's real science behind it. Hanson outlines a few clear steps for TIG.
Okay.
First, you have to actively look for positive facts and turn them into positive experiences. Then you savor that experience. You let it be emotional and sensory, you intensify it, and you hold on to it a bit longer than you normally would.
It's like we need to become connoisseurs of positive experiences.
Yes.
Savor the flavors, linger on the aromas.
Yes.
I like that analogy.
That's great.
What kinds of good are we talking about here?
It's a wide range from basic things like feeling safe and secure to more complex experiences like gratitude, connection, or even spiritual insights.
Oh, wow.
It could be the warmth of the sun on your skin, the feeling of accomplishment after finishing a task, or the simple joy of sharing a laugh with a friend.
I'm starting to see how powerful this could be. By intentionally focusing on these positive experiences,
Yes.
we're giving them more neural weight, counteracting that pesky negativity bias. What are some of the benefits of practicing TIG?
The benefits are plentiful. TIG can help us build resilience, reduce stress and anxiety, boost our mood, and even heal old pain.
Really?
It's like we're building up a reservoir of positive resources to draw on when things get tough.
Okay, I'm sold on the idea of TIG. It fits perfectly with this whole concept of using our minds to change our brains. But where does Buddhism specifically come into play in all of this?
Buddhism emphasizes the interconnected nature of all beings and the power of compassion and loving kindness.
Okay.
These concepts beautifully complement Hanson's exploration of the social brain and the importance of connection and empathy.
This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Feels like we're uncovering a whole new dimension of human potential by exploring these connections between Buddhism and neuroscience.
It is fascinating, isn't it? And we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to explore about cultivating compassion and loving kindness. Ready to dive deeper.
Absolutely. Let's keep going.
So we've been exploring how Buddhism emphasizes interconnectedness and compassion, and these concepts really align with Hanson's exploration of the social brain.
It seems like our brains are wired for connection, but it can be a complex thing to navigate.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about what's happening in the social brain from a neuroscience perspective?
Well, our brains are indeed wired for connection. Think about it. Reptiles and fish mostly focus on avoiding harm and approaching rewards.
Okay.
But mammals and birds, they take it a step further with attachment, especially primates and especially humans.
Right.
Social capabilities have been a primary driver of brain evolution.
So we're hardwired to connect, and that's actually driven the evolution of our brains.
It's really remarkable how evolution has shaped us.
Yeah.
Mammals and birds tend to have bigger brains than reptiles and fish, and the more social a primate species is, the bigger the cortex.
Interesting.
Humans have taken this to a whole new level. Since our hominid ancestors started making tools about 2.5 million years ago, our brains have tripled in size.
Wow.
And a large part of that growth is dedicated to social functions like empathy, language, and cooperative planning.
That makes sense. A bigger, more complex brain requires a longer childhood,
Exactly.
which means more parental care and stronger social bonds to ensure survival.
Right.
So all this socializing is literally shaping our brains.
It is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But this social wiring can be a double-edged sword.
Oh, how so?
Hanson talks about this concept of us versus them, which is a core evolutionary strategy. cooperate within your group, and be wary or even aggressive toward those outside it. Both capacities are wired into our brains.
It sounds like a constant push and pull between connection and division.
Yeah.
Our brains are primed for connection, but can get hijacked by fear and those ingrained tendencies. How do we navigate this complexity?
Well, Hanson uses a powerful analogy.
Oh, wait.
Two wolves, love and hate. Love sees a vast circle where everyone is included, while hate draws a small circle sometimes, including only the self.
Okay.
The key is to consciously choose which wolf we feed.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
But it makes me wonder, how exactly do we feed the wolf of love? How do we strengthen those connections and overcome those tendencies toward fear and division?
It takes conscious effort and practice.
Right.
One powerful way is to focus on similarities between us and them.
Yeah.
Remembering we're all human beings sharing this planet can shift our perspective.
That's a good point.
It also helps to consider others as children, to see their vulnerability and innocence. Even noticing good things about people we find neutral or unpleasant can make a difference. Bringing to mind the feeling of being cared for by someone can also help to open our hearts. And of course, practicing loving-kindness meditation, where we extend well wishes to ourselves and all beings, is a powerful way to cultivate compassion and connection.
Those are some great tips.
Yeah.
Empathy seems like a key ingredient here.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about empathy from a neuroscience perspective?
Empathy is literally feeling what another person is feeling,
Right.
putting yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
It involves bodily resonance, emotional attunement, and even conceptual understanding. And thankfully, our brains are built for it.
Right.
We have mirror neuron systems that fire when we see someone else perform an action as if we were doing it ourselves. We have emotional resonance circuits, especially in the insula, that allow us to feel the emotions of others. And we have a theory of mind network in the prefrontal cortex that helps us understand the thoughts, intentions, and beliefs of others.
It's amazing to think we're literally wired to feel each other's feelings and understand each other's perspectives.
It is amazing.
But even with these neural mechanisms for empathy, it sounds like it still takes effort.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
We have to pay attention, to be open, and be willing to drop our judgments and aversions. It also helps to actively investigate, ask questions, listen deeply, and try to see things from the other person's point of view.
It sounds like cultivating empathy is an ongoing practice, not something we can turn on or off at will.
Yeah.
It's a commitment to staying open and curious about other people's experiences.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that empathy is a two-way street. We can give empathy, receive it, and even ask for it. Sometimes simply naming empathy as a topic in a relationship can make a big difference.
Interesting.
We can use the framework of nonviolent communication, or NVC, to express our needs and feelings clearly and compassionately.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've got empathy as this foundation for connection, and we build on that with compassion and loving kindness. Can you tell us more about how these practices work together?
Compassion is essentially the wish that a being not suffer, combined with sympathetic concern.
All right.
And loving-kindness takes it a step further by actively wishing for the well-being of ourselves and all beings.
Right.
Hanson emphasizes that these qualities are not just nice ideas, they're literally good for our brains.
So practicing compassion and loving kindness can actually change our neural wiring.
Absolutely. When we cultivate these positive states, we're strengthening the neural circuits associated with care, connection, and well-being. And this can have ripple effects throughout our lives and relationships. Hanson shares some beautiful quotes from the Buddha about loving kindness, emphasizing its boundless and unconditional nature. It's a reminder that these qualities are accessible to all of us, regardless of our background or beliefs.
That's a powerful message. It sounds like he offers some practical steps for cultivating these qualities too.
He does. We've already talked about focusing on similarities and considering others as children.
Right.
Another powerful practice is to reflect on the suffering of so many people in the world.
Okay.
This can help us open our hearts and connect with our shared humanity. And of course, we can also self-generate feelings of kindness and love by bringing to mind someone we care about or recalling a time when we felt deeply loved.
These are all great suggestions. Cultivating compassion and loving kindness sounds like an ongoing journey of expanding our circles of care and connection. But what about when we need to set boundaries or assert ourselves in relationships? How do we balance those needs with the principles of compassion and wise speech?
That's a great question. It's definitely a balancing act. Hanson emphasizes the importance of healthy assertiveness, speaking your truth, and pursuing your aims in a way that respects both yourself and others. It's not about being aggressive or dominating, but rather about communicating clearly, honestly, and with compassion.
So how do we put this into practice? What are some tips for communicating assertively while staying grounded in compassion?
First and foremost, it's essential to be on your own side, to treat yourself with kindness and compassion. It also helps to name the truth to yourself, to acknowledge your feelings and needs without judgment. And it's important to find your refuges, sources of strength and support that can help you stay grounded when things get tough.
Okay.
This could be your spiritual practice, your connection to nature, or even simply your own sense of reason and integrity.
Those are great reminders. It sounds like we need a strong foundation of self-compassion to communicate effectively in challenging situations.
Definitely.
What else can we do to communicate more skillfully?
Hanson suggests using the NBC framework we talked about earlier.
Right.
Remember, when X happens, I feel Y because I need Z. This simple structure can help us communicate our needs and feelings clearly and respectfully. It's also important to distinguish between empathy building, acknowledging the other person's perspective, and policy making, clearly stating what you need and want in a given situation.
That's such a helpful distinction. It reminds me of that saying, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Exactly. And when it comes to policy making, it's important to focus on solutions and agreements that move forward. It's not about dwelling on the past or trying to change the other person.
This has been so insightful. I'm really starting to see how these practices of mindfulness, compassion, and assertive communication can work together to create more fulfilling and harmonious relationships.
It's all about finding that balance between wisdom and compassion, between honoring our own needs and respecting the needs of others. It's a lifelong journey, and there will be bumps along the way, but the rewards are well worth the effort.
I couldn't agree more. Feels like we've covered so much ground in this deep dive into Buddha's brain. It's amazing how much these ancient wisdom traditions and modern neuroscience have to offer each other.
It really is.
I know.
What stands out to you from all of this?
I think for me, the whole idea of self-directed neuroplasticity, it's so empowering.
Yeah.
It really highlights that we're not stuck with the brain we're born with.
Yeah.
You know, we can actually use our minds to shape our brains and our lives in positive ways.
Right.
Like taking the driver's seat of our own mental and emotional well-being.
I agree. And what's so remarkable is that we can do this through practices that are accessible to anyone.
Exactly.
Like mindfulness, taking in the good, cultivating compassion and loving kindness.
Yeah.
We don't need fancy equipment or expensive therapies. We have the power to change our brains from the inside out.
That's what I find so inspiring about all of this. It's not just about understanding the brain.
Yeah.
It's about putting that knowledge into action and creating real change in our lives.
Exactly. Hanson offers so many practical tools and techniques that we can start using right away.
I know.
It's not about becoming some kind of enlightened guru. It's about making small, consistent changes that add up over time.
It reminds me of that quote from the Dalai Lama.
Oh, yeah.
Just as ripples spread out when a single pebble is dropped into water, the actions of individuals can have far-reaching effects.
That's a perfect analogy. Every time we choose to focus on the positive, to cultivate compassion, to communicate skillfully,
Right.
we're creating those ripples of positive change, not just in our own lives, but in the world around us.
It's like we're all part of this interconnected web, and our actions, however small they may seem, can influence the whole.
Exactly. And the more we practice these skills, the more we strengthen those positive neural pathways,
Right.
making it easier to respond to life's challenges with wisdom and compassion.
So where do we go from here? What's one small change our listeners could make today to start shaping their brain in a more positive direction?
A great place to start is with taking in the good. Tonight, before you go to bed, take a few minutes to reflect on one positive experience from your day. It could be something as simple as a delicious meal, a moment of laughter, or a kind gesture from a stranger. Bring that experience to mind, really savor it, and let it sink into your awareness. Notice how it feels in your body, what emotions it evokes, and what thoughts arise.
What a great suggestion.
Oh,
I think I'll do that tonight too.
yeah.
It's so easy to let those positive moments slip away without truly appreciating them.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder.
My pleasure. It's a simple practice, but it can have a profound impact over time.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Buddha's brain. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical tools for shaping your own brain and living a more fulfilling life.
Until next time, keep those positive ripples spreading